Hi guys, Claudia Boleyn here, and this is going to be like a non-scripted video. I asked recently if you guys had any questions for me about like mental health stuff, because I just feel like if there's any way that I can like help in any way, I really need to pay you guys back. I really do owe you, so if there's anything I can do, like just, please ask. Some of these topics are going to be like too in-depth to put in like a video of loads and loads of stuff, so I thought if I made like some maybe shorter little videos just answering them, or just like talking about my experience of them. Also just like preemptively, I know I do this, it's so annoying, like it must be so annoying for you, but I do like preempt in my intros and like have to give you some like disclaimers and stuff, because people do like take you the wrong way online and all that kind of thing. I'm not an expert in terms of like, I'm not a medical doctor or anything like that. Obviously I do a lot of research into it, I care about that stuff, and like by experience and the stuff that I've gone through I can talk about, but like I'm not an expert. I don't regard myself as an expert apart from by experience, which I think is really important and really valid, but don't take my word as like sacred or law or anything. Like I'm just another person. I'm just someone sitting in my bedroom. I'm just the same as any of you guys watching this, so I hope that's a comfort. Actually, it certainly like reassures me when I see you guys commenting to realise that there's other people like me out there, like just like me, just separated by distance, but like quite similar people. Okay, so the question that I got, and by the way, I'm not going to like say names in these just in case like they're personal and at some point somebody thinks, oh god, I wish I hadn't like associated my name with that, it was really personal, so I'm not going to put that on the screen or anything, or I'm just the comment, not the name. Okay, I had DBT today, and I mentioned that quite often I feel embarrassed for the thoughts I have frequently, and one of the group leaders said thoughts often reflect stuff we heard growing up. It makes sense, as they don't sound like I would talk often, as in the words used are different from my usual jargon, but yet they are there. It's hard for me to detach from such things, especially since I started attending this group, and have a lot to learn still. Hope you're okay, Claudia. Much love to you and your loved ones. Loads of love to you and your loved ones too. Yeah, so I did kind of reply to this in the comments, but I thought I should make a little video because I have this as well. So something I've really struggled with growing up generally and through recovery as well is that I do have like the two Claudias, if that makes sense, like their inner voices. I don't mean in terms of like an actual voice. Obviously some people actually do have that. I don't mean like that, I don't mean literally, but I mean like the sort of inner, you know how RuPaul might say like the inner saboteur, that kind of negative self-talk. And I think when some people refer to that, they just mean like negative feelings about themselves, but what I get, and what I think it sounds like you get as well, some of you might have this, is yeah, quite literally like it doesn't sound like my phrasing. It's not my words, and often it's replaying words or things I've heard from other people in the past, and I've really struggled with detaching from that, because for a while I was so worried that those thoughts and those words and those reactions were me. Because I think when you grow up in certain environments, you can't actually help but absorb certain things or certain judgments or certain like toxic mindsets and things like that. And I think one of the hardest things about that situation is obviously being a victim and feeling like that, the pain for yourself, but also it's rarely so simple, because you've often absorbed so much stuff yourself, and as you like unlearn, it's like you're trying to like rescue yourself if you can, like in a kind of try and not be passive, try and do that stuff. But it's also very difficult because it also comes with the fact that you have to face all that negative stuff that's in you. It's not, you can't just like step away and change overnight. It's something that you have to commit to every day, I find. And I'm always challenging myself. I'm always trying to challenge my thoughts on things, and having to figure out, I do this too much sometimes actually, I doubt myself too much, and having to figure out what is actually what I feel and what I value, and what is what I learned to feel and value. And I still do struggle to separate that, and I think that might be a BPD thing as well, like an identity issue, but it also ties to like dysfunction or abuse or something like that, So when I first became a feminist, for example, I wasn't immediately a feminist. Like my views probably were quite, but it was like a time when it was considered like a bad word, and we learned about it in sixth form. And at the time, the people around me, like in my family and stuff, like the women in my family as well, who are actually quite strong women, but also like they were kind of anti the label of feminist, and like, oh, people making a fuss out of nothing, and a lot of stuff about like sexual assault and stuff like that, and like victim blaming stuff, which actually was so difficult, because as I got older, hearing that stuff is quite difficult, because you don't feel like you can confide in people about stuff. And I think people don't realise sometimes when they do victim blaming that they're often talking to victims, and they don't realise. And all it does is make us think, like, it makes you feel ashamed, and it also makes you feel like you can't confide in anyone, so it's really bad. But something that our family did, like, no, not to drag my family, I love my family very much, but like there's a lot of like systems and stuff which I am not happy with. And again, like I'm making a video still about the William and Harry situation, because I think what we're seeing with William and Harry, that situation, is maybe a golden child scapegoat situation. We're seeing the scapegoat actually leaving and exposing a system, and the media is obviously in attack mode, silencing mode, just trying to destroy Harry at any cost, which, I don't know, I see a lot of parallels to like dysfunctional families and stuff like that. So I'm going to be making a couple of videos on that subject. I'm not like a monarchist. I'm not coming at it like, oh, you know, the princes are better than anyone else because they're princes. I just wanted to like analyse those links, because I'm seeing a lot of people feeling very strongly on it, and I think it's because a lot of us like can relate to those feelings, and certainly those systems as well. Like it is quite triggering to see that, honestly, constantly, especially people on Twitter are always saying things like, oh, he shouldn't be airing dirty laundry, and he should just get on with it, get a grip, like it wasn't that bad, and, you know, all this stuff. I don't think they really often think about the fact that a lot of people are there who are then going into their shells and feeling ashamed and going into self-hate and self-blame, and they stay within an abusive system and they never get out because they blame themselves. Like, I wish people would think about that sometimes. But yeah, so why I bring this to feminism is that there's something that when I was younger, you know, there was a lot of judgment towards women. So, you know, women on TV, like what they looked like, what they sounded like, a lot of mocking of like just general women on TV. And also it's given me really bad issues with appearance as well. I kind of fluctuate with my appearance because there was that much judgment about women around, like, you know, on the TV and things like that, it made me, like, in some ways, sometimes I wanted to, like, rebel and not care about what I look like at all, and throw myself into academic stuff and be like, well, I'm not going to allow myself to be judged on that. And then on the other hand, it made me feel really insecure, and, like, I sometimes felt like, oh no, I'm not pretty enough, and, like, it really depressed me, and I don't know, it just makes things feel really, really difficult. So obviously learning about feminism really helped me with that, and learning about like internalized misogyny and things like that. But I know that's one of the first things is that was one of the first things I had to unlearn before I even started doing the work about mental health stuff. I started to realise that I had absorbed, and I was ashamed of it, this kind of feeling towards women that was actually even more complicated because obviously I'm attracted to women as well. So there was also a lot of like internalized biphobia where I was maybe afraid or ashamed of like admitting how I felt. And sometimes I do this thing where I'd really fancy somebody, like a celebrity, but I didn't really realise it, and I felt kind of ashamed, and it was very messed up in my head, and I didn't really know what it meant, and I would kind of misinterpret the kind of fixation as maybe not liking them sometimes, or being really harsh on them. So yeah, I think the issue's more complicated if you're LGBT as well, but I definitely had a lot of judgments, and I started to realise that, first of all, my instinct was that it was bad, because through feminism I started to realise that like it was kind of like it didn't make any sense. It didn't actually make any sense, especially when women did it as well, because by judging those other women, we're just putting ourselves into those boxes, you know, we're creating this weird hierarchy that doesn't actually help anybody. Like, in the moment it probably makes people feel better to put other women down and think, well, okay, well, I'm better than them, but it just enforces the idea that like, oh, I just found it really toxic, and that was one of the first things I realised. And I realised that in my mind I had this kind of like negative self-talk about women. So inside I was like pretty like judgmental, and I think growing up as well, like I was really classist growing up, which is mad because obviously I'm mixed, and like my mum is from a kind of like middle class lifestyle. Well, that side of my family kind of is, like, I don't know, they like to kind of portray middle classness. Anyway, that was important there, the white side of my family. And then the Indian side of my family, obviously we're immigrants who came from India, and, you know, completely working class, didn't have any money. And when my Grandma Bibi was widowed, she used to work all hours. She used to sew for people, and she used to like go to the farms and pick fruit in the fields and things, and she'd have to take my dad as a little baby with her, because if she didn't work, like, there's, you know, what would she do? It was a terrible situation. So I was very much like between that. But because I grew up with like my white family and in that kind of middle class bubble, I actually took on a lot of classism that I had to unlearn growing up. So things like judging accents. So you'll probably notice that my accent sounds, I don't know, depending on like where you're from, some people say I sound quite posh. I don't think it's necessarily posh, but like I was always taught like to enunciate, and things like being stopped mid-story to correct grammar, and like stopped if you don't say your T's and things. So it became a bit of a nervous thing, an anxiety thing. So it became like an anxiety about getting it wrong. I'm trying to change that more, but like for example, when Doctor Who was first on, I absolutely love Rose Tyler. Like I think she's fantastic. But I remember at the time, this kind of feeling of like, I don't know, the people around me being like, oh, she's like a chav, she's this, she's that, like no EastEnders, all that kind of thing, chavvy accents and things. And it made me, like when I was younger, it made me a real snob. And it was ridiculous because, like, obviously half of my family is like this working class side of my family, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But when I was younger, it did make me this like classist snob because I absorbed it. It was only as I got older that I started to think like, wait a minute, that's absolutely ridiculous. And actually one of the parts of that is that you know, my friends at school, for example, like one of my friends from school, one of my best friends at school, was like seriously didn't have any of the like the lifestyle stuff that we did, and obviously like it shouldn't have taken something like this for me to realise, honestly, but the environment I was in was like always pushing that. But I remember, like, you know, she was so smart, you know, so clever, and it used to bug me that people used to like not think she was, and it started to make me notice as well that often people would think that they would automatically think that I was more clever just because of my voice, which was annoying. Like, obviously it's nice to be thought of as clever, and I like to think that hopefully I am at some things, but it really started to make me feel really angry because, you know, you notice the difference, and yeah, it just really, really made me mad. And so that kind of negative self-talk about women, about accents, about grammar, and obviously, you know, it's really bad actually that was a thing that I grew up kind of thinking and Dan did, because obviously we are mixed, and those actually ideas, although they're not like badly intentioned or anything like that, you know, they do actually discriminate against like immigrants, people of colour, different cultures, different accents. You know, I'm very interested now as I'm older in, you know, because I studied English Lit for my degree, and I got first, and I'm doing my master's now, and something I'm very, very interested in is language use, and how language develops and grows, and how it changes with dialect, and how really what people think is this like sacred, you know, grammar that's going to stay the same, pronunciation that's going to stay the same, actually it's always moved. So I often find people who cling to those things rather than like context, I find it quite like pedantic, really, and it actually alienates a lot of people from different backgrounds who are incredibly smart and, you know, ought to be in charge of things. I think that's kind of where we're stuck with like Boris Johnson and the Tories. I think there's this lingering feeling that the accent means being smarter or more reliable. It goes into a lot of stuff like colonialism, like British India, all that stuff, like all these things. Once you start unpacking it all connects. That's why I turned from like a liberal feminist to like an intersectional feminist, because I started to think, wait, actually all this stuff kind of connects together. Anyway, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent there, but like I hope it kind of makes sense where I'm going with that. So those things in general I had to unlearn coming from this environment. And I think I've unlearned it pretty well, but I still catch myself sometimes. And sometimes I feel very ashamed because sometimes I think something in my head. And I know from therapy that, like, you know, it's not the thought that's the problem. The thought that you first get, the impulse, isn't necessarily the real you. It might be what you've grown up to believe, like what you've been conditioned to think. And then it's the thought after that defines who you are. And that's really helped me, and that's really... like, you know, obviously I'm talking about this in terms of like politics and social issues, but I'll get to this in a second. Like, it also means in terms of like self-esteem and, you know, trauma and stuff like that. But that I started doing that, so I started to take that on board, and I started to think, okay, so these are the thoughts that I've been conditioned with. Like, of course I would be, because from childhood those were going into my head. But I look at my thoughts, you know, I think of it, it comes into my head, and then I look at it and I think, right, do I need to discard it? Is it actually worth anything, or is it just like a ghost of childhood, and do I need to just get rid of it? And that helps me with BPD as well, with like the moods, and with ADHD as well, because that's you know, they're both like, they make you quite emotional and impulsive. Obviously with BPD you get a lot of self-hate. You know, I constantly feel like I'm close to suicide all the time. It's quite a scary way to live, really. Not to sound like dramatic or anything, like I'm okay, but it is quite a difficult way to live, really, like that. So that's helped me a lot, thinking that even though inside my head when something is bad, I immediately think, okay, well, I need to like kill myself, like I shouldn't be here, I'm shameful, I'm evil, like I'm embarrassed to be alive, I'm a burden, I'm making everything awful for everyone, like things would be better if I wasn't here, all that stuff, worse than that even. And because of that, I know now that from therapy, like that thought, those thoughts were conditioned into me for whatever reason, but they're not real. I step back and I challenge them. So sometimes that's really hard when I'm low, but I do say to myself, like, sometimes it helps to write it down even. And I know that sounds really silly. I know it does probably sound really silly to people who don't get that, but sometimes I write them down and then I refute them. Academic stuff kind of helps me deal with stuff even when I find emotions hard, because I dissociate when trauma happens or big emotion happens. I can deal with things better on a intellectual level. It's kind of how I did it growing up. So that's the kind of tactic I learned just for me personally. It works for me. It can also help to assign the words to someone or where they came from. So then like you're kind of taking it away from yourself. So once I've written it down, I'll look at it, I'll write it in the phrasing I hear it, and then I'll look at it and I'll do basically what you said in this ask, and I'll say like, well, that's not my voice, is it? That's not how I express myself. And then I map it back and I think, okay, so where did I hear that? That can be quite difficult, you know, in a trauma situation. You know, it's very hard to do that. And obviously I won't in this video get into like where the stuff comes from, various different people and stuff. But once you can assign it to somebody else, once you think, actually, this is just a memory. That's all it is. It's just like a ghost. It's just haunting me, but it's not mine. Like, it's squatting in my head. Like in Doctor Who, the Weeping Angel, like squatting in someone's head. That's what it feels like. It's in there. And it doesn't like me. And it's trying to get me. It's also like in Daredevil. Dan showed me season 3 of Daredevil the other day. I loved it so much, I really did. And the idea that Matt Murdock, Daredevil, has like the self-talk. I'm sure that he's got BPD, by the way. I'm pretty sure Matt Murdock has BPD. And I love to see a BPD hero. But the way they visualise that on screen is quite literally like, say, the villain, Kingpin, would actually be in his head. Like, you'd actually see him saying these negative things to Matt that Matt was thinking. And you also, like, the same with his dad, who passed away, you know. And that really helped me. It was very therapeutic to see that, because that's how it does feel for me as well. It really does feel like that. So assigning it to other people helps. Something that I do struggle with now, obviously I'm trying to set boundaries in my life, and I'm looking at a lot of stuff this year. I'm processing trauma, abuse, just trying to sort it out in my head. There's so many different feelings of like anger, and then grief at stuff, and then frustration at myself. And of course it also brings up the negative stuff that you absorbed and that you might have then put out into the world. So there's additional guilt too. So much guilt, I find, the whole thing, especially when it's when you're looking at like a family system, and obviously it's very complicated when you love the people. It's easier if people are just nasty. So for some people in my life, it's much easier because they're just out and out, like, you know, obviously nasty and horrible, and you can, like, it's quite easy to see if you step back that it's like, it's weird, like it's not anything that a normal person would think or do. So, you know, that's kind of it's easier because you can kind of think, okay, well, like, that's obviously some issue they've got going on, like, it's not mine. But obviously when it's a situation where it's like a dysfunctional setup, and, you know, sometimes pain's passed down, sometimes people that you love can really hurt you, sometimes they do it because they think they're doing the right thing, they don't know any better. Sometimes it can just be malice, it can just be spiteful, it can be uncontained emotions, anything, you know. I find that really hard. So what I struggle with so much is I really struggle with guilt, because I've always got this thing in my head that because I kind of grew up thinking that I was like a burden or something when I was myself, or when I was real. So obviously when I was being perfect and good, I always tried to be so good. When I was doing those things, I kind of was more okay. I still didn't feel safe as myself though, because that wasn't me. Like, I didn't feel safe to emote generally, if that makes sense. Like, I didn't feel safe to show the real me. I always was performing. I felt like I was performing every single day of my life until I collapsed, like until I had the breakdown when I was 12, and I felt until that day I'd just been performing for my whole life. And obviously the horrible reality of that, the moment that I kind of caved in after giving it everything I had, then being kind of punished for that was one of the worst experiences of my life, and it still kind of lives with me, really, that very mentality. It's horrible to think about, really. Yeah, there's a lot of it's very complicated, and there's a lot of guilt, especially if you're someone who's interested in psychology and things like that, because like I think I've said in other videos, I over empathize sometimes. I think, you know, what other people are going through, and I kind of make excuses, and I think, well, maybe they're doing this because they were treated like this, and it's probably not their fault, it's probably not intentional. But I'm trying to remember now that in order to set boundaries and be healthy, and even just be safe, really, and to go on in my life, I'm still allowed to have the boundaries. Like, it doesn't actually matter what the intent was. I can still feel sympathy and love and compassion, but that also doesn't work as an excuse for pain caused. And I try and think about that with myself as well, because, you know, when I think about my life, and I think about, you know, the sort of person that I always tried to be good, but also like all these things that I did absorb and probably put out. In fact, I know I did, you know, I know that I would have had these things. And knowing that accountability for myself as well. It's difficult. It's quite hard to do, but it's important. You know, people have to be accountable for their actions, even if you sympathise or empathise for why And I definitely feel very strongly that like it means a lot to me if somebody who's come from a bad place like puts in the work to change, and I really do respect that so much. So hard to do. I'm still trying to do it every single day. I'm always trying constantly to try and just be the best possible person I can be. But you know, in order to do that, for myself and for other people, and you know, even things like thinking of myself as a parent, if I ever am a parent, I would like to be a mum. Ideally, I'd like to adopt kids. I've always kind of thought I'd like to adopt kids. I don't know if I'll be well enough, really, but just in case, if I am, it's really important to me that I do unlearn the stuff and set the boundaries, and I have to deal with the negative talk in my head and figure out what's right and what isn't, because I know, you know, I know what it is, you know, how fragile kids are, especially young kids, and I don't want my children to be having to unlearn things for the rest of their lives and to feel like they're on a lag, and I don't want them to have that guilt. And when I say that, like, you know, I'm not aiming that specifically at any one person. It's a system for me, and that's why I look at the royal family stuff so much, because I relate so much to a system that the idea of a system where the people inside aren't necessarily malicious. Like, some of them are, but like not necessarily all of them. Like, some of them are just under a lot of pressure themselves and never got the help that they should have got. So it's all very complicated. In some ways I think it's a good thing though. I think that although it's hard for us to have that kind of thing, you know, a lot of people who've gone through trauma or whatever have those feelings and replay that stuff, and it can be really awful, especially when you're low. But on the plus side, I think it does, hopefully, some of us, I think it makes more reflective. I think sadly it makes some people more defensive, because, and I can understand it as well, I can understand that, because if someone is being put down all the time and they're not sure who they are and they feel like so attacked, you know, I can understand people putting up walls and finding it hard to then admit when they ever are wrong or to accept criticism, and I completely understand that. And actually, when I was younger, I found criticism impossible. It wounded me so much because I took it so personally when I was younger. Because when I grew up, you know, that I felt like if you did wrong, it was very personal. It was never really about the thing you did. It became a personal attack kind of thing. So that was a thing for me. But I think the good thing about therapy and like unlearning, and I'm lucky really about going through the mental health issues, and I do consider myself lucky, although it's been really hard in this regard, which is that I see a lot of people who are like neurotypical and don't have mental health issues, and they're the sort of people that really get angry. Like, for example, when you look back at history, and you might look back at, for example, like in our country, like the British Empire, and a lot of people really idealise it, and they don't want to hear about the suffering. And again, I'm half English, half Indian, so I know both the way both places will tell it, and obviously I can do my own research, and it's very clear to me that the way they're selling the British Empire is not the reality, and that a lot of harm was caused. And I see a lot of people that this kind of goes in, I always end up talking about the same things, I guess, but the idea that criticism is aggressive or like a bad thing and damaging and an attack, I actually don't necessarily agree with that, because in order for me to personally be a better person, and I'm definitely a better person than I was, and I'm still trying, you know, it wouldn't have worked if I was somebody that just decided that if someone has criticism that it's automatically wrong. Not to say that every criticism that anyone ever gets is right and needs to be listened to. Like, you can obviously sort through it and see what's right and what's not. But I actually find a refusal to reflect quite worrying, because I just think that's where a lot of the problems lie, and that's something that Dan and I are getting more used to doing. I've noticed, like, we're able to talk to each other now. Like, I've never been able to talk to anyone like this before in my life, but we're able to talk to each other and like discuss like how we feel, and like if one of us is upset and feel it, and like I know, like, fairly recent, not that recently, but when I was just having my breakdown, there's this one night where so I was really ill at the time, and they'd upped my medication, so it really like messed with my head. Anyway, so Dan and I had this argument, but I felt like I was out of line. Like, I felt like I was definitely, like, I was quite ashamed of myself really, because I feel like I was I felt defensive, and so I kind of attacked, if that makes sense. And Dan and I have spoken about this, you know, a lot. I think we both tend to do this at various points. You know, when you come from a certain system, that's what you know. So sometimes when you're off your guard, it comes out, and then you end up feeling like, we've spoken about this so much, but sometimes you afterwards you feel like it's an awful weird feeling to feel. But I think the difference is that, like, and this is what brings me hope, is that when Dan or I do anything like that, we're able to say, wait, actually that wasn't okay, and I'm sorry, and I need to make sure that doesn't happen again. I need to work on that. Like, Dan said something the other day. He's so wise. It was just a casual, like, we're just chatting about anything, and he was just saying that he thought that, you know, people should be trying to grow and become the best possible person all their lives. Like, they shouldn't, like, get to a point in their life where they just decide that that's who they are and they're stuck there, but that they should always try every day to try and be better. Never assume that you've reached a point where you're perfect. Also, like, not to go the other way, not to, like, completely hate yourself for mistakes, but you know, to never stop learning. It's a process, and that helps me a lot. A lot of what Dan says helps me. I think because he went to uni away from home. He was away for 3 years, and I've always loved Dan, I've been very close to him, but he came back very wise. He came back very, very wise, because he had all this extra... He'd been out in the world, if that makes sense. Like, he'd been out in the world, he'd seen things very differently. He had developed his own value system. He'd realised, he was starting to figure out, like, what's okay and what wasn't, and boundaries and things. And that was important to me. So it's not even just, you know, like you were saying, it's not just even in the words in my head sometimes. Like, sometimes it's about myself. You know, I hear these things that have been said to me, and I hear them, and it wounds you because it takes you back to that place. Especially if you're someone like, obviously I do have BPD, so it hits me really hard. It's very wounding. But also in terms of, but also my own thoughts. Sometimes I make some sort of judgment in my head, you know, like instinctively, like something from my childhood, like I'll see someone on TV or something, or I'll see something on Twitter, and I have to, like, stop myself. And I've said before to Dan, I don't know if I said here to you, but like I'm so, the worst fear that I ever have, like my worst fear would be ever allowing that stuff to become me. My worst fear would be to become that sort of person and ever do that, because I feel like the worrying thing that a lot of us have, if you come from trauma or something like that, is there's this constant fear that isn't really talked about enough, that you're scared that what if you become like it? Even when you do everything to, like, be different. I don't know, I feel like I have this fear. Emmerdale does this quite well. There's a character called Aaron Dingle, and he suffers feeling like this a lot. The struggle of feeling like, well, what if there's just bad in me? Like, what if it's too late? What if I'm bad? What if, because I think these things inside, what if that means I'm a terrible person? Like, what if that's me? What if me being good's just a lie? And something therapy taught me, which is so good, is that, like, it's not, like, that really is just what you were taught. And the very fact that you're able to be saying, like, in your own mind, like, that's awful, like, no, that's not me. You making that choice is who you are. And I really, like, I think that's really important. I know that, like, I always do worry, because I feel like if I ever did lean into that part of me, if I ever did take on what I'd been given, if I did become part of that, I do worry about the things I'd say. I think I could be very, 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 very unkind. I think I could be so cruel to people. And I'm just constantly, like, every day trying to make sure that I'm not. Which is silly, really, I guess, because, like, I'm not, and I haven't been, like, for such a long time. But you still worry. If you come from that, you still worry that it's in you, don't you? You still think, oh, it's horrible. It's a weird, weird feeling. So something that actually weirdly helped me with this. So obviously all that weird stuff on my channel, like, obviously when I was having my breakdown, so there was some weird stuff. So I was getting, like, harassed by certain parts of the family, etc. And it was very much like, it actually does remind me of the Harry thing. You know, it's like, don't air the dirty laundry, like, quickly attack, like, what's she going to say, like, that kind of thing. But I think actually seeing the insults spill out onto the channel and things, like, in a public sense, actually did actually help me in a weird way. It feels weird to say that helps me because it was so awful, but in the sense that, like, you can literally see the words literally coming from other people, and it helps you to detach so much, because you're able to think, okay, well, that's the negative self-talk. I know where that comes from, like, but that's all it is. Like, it's attached to other people. It's not mine. Like, it's quite literally theirs. So that really helped. That really did help me quite a lot. Weirdly, I know it sounds weird to say, but you know, and also to have other people being like, that's no, like, that literally makes no sense. It's abusive. It's sick. Like, it's creepy. Like, you know, having outside people being able to say that, it helps me even in my own head when that kind of stuff comes into my head to say, I know it sounds really silly, but, like, I actually remember what some of you guys say. That probably sounds so pathetic. Like, I know it probably does, but, you know, I remember things where you guys are saying things like, no, like, that's abusive, that's bad, like, it's not acceptable. It's just wrong. It's not it just helps me not take it on. And sometimes I do think of your messages sometimes. That probably sounds so stupid, but yeah, like it helps me so much to have that. Like it really helped me. Like I don't even know if you guys knew how much you helped me with that. Like especially detangling some of the stuff I've had in my head for so long, and to actually be able to say like, okay, that never was mine, was it? Like it's not mine. It's not mine. Yeah, it will just get so tangled in your head sometimes. I also think like there's a strength in. I know it's really hard to do it, but if you actually like write the stuff down and you find it and you look at them and you look at these things that people have said and you look at these beliefs you have about yourself, and you can put them into lists and you can decide like, are they true? Are they genuine criticisms that I need to work on? Or are they other people's projections and other people's expectations, and they're not me and they're not my value system? That really helps me, because it's helped me separate a lot of things. Like for example, when I was growing up, I was considered to be quite like melodramatic, that kind of thing, which I've realised now, you know, wasn't mine. I think we were quite there was a lot of like repressed stuff, I think. So just normal emoting and things like that, like normal reactions sometimes were cast as being quite hysterical, which has really damaged me in my life a lot, actually. I still struggle with that. But that's something I realised like isn't actually mine. It was just a label that was assigned but doesn't make any sense. I think a lot of ableist stuff as well, like so a lot of beliefs like sometimes the stuff that really haunts, well, used to really get to me a lot is for example, like when I was getting sent back weird stuff from certain family members and stuff, there was all this stuff like all these messages like, oh, you're the most self-absorbed person ever, and like, you're pathetic, like, everyone thinks you're pathetic, and like all you do is make videos in your room at this age, like it's anyway, just like endless like verbal abuse and stuff, which like obviously I won't get into on this channel and stuff, like, but that was a lot of stuff that you guys didn't know about at the time, and obviously when you're low you start absorbing stuff like because you think at first because of the trauma and the abuse and stuff, part of you starts to like go back to that place, and you start to think like, it can be so dangerous, like if you don't talk, like that's why I love this channel, but actually like in therapy and that kind of thing, and even like obviously the police and all that kind of thing, it actually made it so much easier, because I was able to like take it out of my head, if you know what I mean, like because it was actually sent to me, like it was able to come out of my head. I was able to look at it and think, to counter it, we learn to do that in steps actually. Like for example, like something I'd always felt a little bit weird about growing up as well is obviously I'm slightly behind other people my age in terms of independence, not in other ways, like in other ways like I feel like for example, like I'm doing my masters, so I could do, my self-esteem's okay, because we're all different anyway, like there's different ways to thrive, different ways to live, different value systems, and I don't think life's a race, and I think like that's a really harmful thing to think anyway, because I don't like to put like time limits on anything, even things like people turning their lives around and doing the right thing, like I think until the day you die, even if you're an elderly person and you suddenly wake up and you think, oh god, like I regret the harm I've caused and I want to change it, like I don't think there's a time limit on that ever, like I really don't. And I'm actually so I don't talk about this much on the channel, but I am religious, so I never used to be, and I don't know how I'd classify it, but I am now, so I don't really talk about it that much, but it's really helped me a lot with that idea, really. But putting those things out of your head. So for example, just like in that example, I use it because I think a lot of us feel this as well, especially with the way the government acts. What we have in this country right now is we have this desire to present people who are disabled as scroungers and fakes and like frauds, all that kind of thing. And obviously that's so damaging, especially if you're someone who your disability is a mental illness as well. It's not harder than having a physical disability, but in terms of that's something you actually struggle with a lot. So I think that can be hard anyway because of the messages in society. So something I found really helped in terms of that was making sure that I was part of different communities of different disabled people, different disabled activists and things. Following those people, listening to them. And it's very, like, obviously as well, I think something that really helps me personally anyway, as a socialist, and the way I believe, the way I think about value systems, is that I don't think someone's inherent worth is tied to capitalism anyway. I think that someone as a human being is worth so much more. I think there's different ways of measuring, I think there are so many different ways of measuring the good that people can do. And I reject the capitalist idea, because it's also linked to racist ideas, sexist ideas, all those things. I reject those ideas that people are less or more valuable because of like capitalist like productivity and all that kind of stuff. Like I really, really reject that. So obviously like in terms of like that comment, so for my worldview, I actually thought, well, actually no, that's not my worldview. Other people have that worldview, but it's not the way I think. It's not the way I judge people. I don't think people are unworthy of I don't think that people who are ill are lesser for being ill. I think they probably need more help. And I also think that I know for a fact that because of the people that I follow and stuff, that sometimes people who have these disabilities and things are actually able to be a great help in terms of using the experiences to maybe help other people, or have a lot of empathy, or change systems, and sometimes can be really great at like, I know a lot of the disabled activists and stuff that I follow help me understand so much more about how it intersects with like race issues and stuff like that, in ways that, you know, I would never have thought about before. So, you know, like that one in particular, you know, just plucking that out just to explain to you. So something like that, I step back from it. I think, right, okay, is that a fair evaluation? And I realise actually no, it doesn't come from my value system. It's also coming from projection and unkindness, because like I thought also when it comes to criticism, like you need to look at intent. So like I feel like you can kind of tell, well, I know it can be hard sometimes, but I think most of the time you can tell if a criticism is being made in bad faith or good faith. So for example, like if Dan came to me with an issue, I know that it would be in good faith, because I know that Dan loves me, and I know that Dan's always trying to be better, and he knows that I'm always trying to be better, so I'd know to listen to that. And it's like on my course, like, and it's kind of a silly example, but like with my masters, you know, the creative writing tutors are, their role in criticism is to make us better and to help us. So like, you know, that's criticism that's great to take on because it's literally meant to help you. But I think it's a good idea to ask yourself whether these things are meant to help you or hurt you, because if it's meant to hurt you, then it's not yours. It's not a criticism. Like, it's not something that you can engage with. So you can pretty much dismiss that, I'd say. And also the guilt and stuff, like, you know, the negative self-talk I have is, ungrateful is a big one, I feel, like, it's used in these systems, you know, ungrateful or selfish. And it's often used for people who, it's like calling out a system or a problem. It's like people become defensive and believe that because you're pointing out a problem in the system, that it makes you ungrateful of everything. And again, like with Harry, for example, I've noticed that people are really framing him as being this ungrateful person and so cruel. But all I've ever actually seen him do, and I follow this quite a lot because I'm very interested in this dynamic, is actually like take great care to be especially respectful, especially to the Queen. I've noticed he's very respectful to his grandmother. And I think watching that is very interesting for people. And in some ways it's been really eye-opening and helpful for people to understand how these systems work, not just in like the firm, in the royal institution, and you know, with the tabloids, but in terms of in family dynamics too. It is very complicated, and these dynamics are really hard. I think it really shows you how whistleblowers often get treated like they are ungrateful or selfish, or I know, for example, like, just kind of a bit off topic, but if I ever said anything about racism I'd received, if they knew that I was half Indian coming from that standpoint, people would have the same mentality. It's quite an abusive mentality, and it's all through society, unfortunately. The idea that, well, if you don't like it, go back to India. So instantly it's like making me another. I've never been to India before anyway. I'm British, like I was born here. Yeah, like, so that new nationality and borders bill really scares me, actually, because that could impact my family and, you know, us, really. But it's that same idea that, like, and I've tried to work through in my head. So I've got that in my head because obviously a lot of us grow up with don't air the dirty laundry, reputation first, doesn't matter what you're feeling, doesn't matter what's going on, don't talk about it, like, keep it quiet, protect reputation, like, that's the priority. It doesn't matter what you're putting up with, it doesn't matter what you have to sacrifice, it doesn't matter, like, if we let you be a sacrifice, like, to keep it quiet, like, keep it in. And I see that in systems a lot. And I think something that really helped me as well, like, to look at this stuff, is, you know, the idea of being selfish or ungrateful, for example, in a system, is to actually say, well, actually, no, I am actually very grateful for the positive things. You know, to just, I think, you know, resist that black and white thinking, you know, resist that framing and just say, no, I am incredibly grateful for various things. But that doesn't negate the problems and the issues that I have, you know. A lot of the time people with mental illness or people with BPD, obviously, because we do splitting or we struggle with that, we're often seen as like quite unreasonable and black and white. But I actually find a lot of us, there's another video coming on this, by the way, I made it before but I haven't edited it yet, actually, because we have done therapy and we know about this, I think we're actually quite good at spotting it. I actually think once we've gone to therapy we're probably better than some other neurotypicals at seeing that and seeing, wait, you're making it very all or nothing, and it doesn't have to be, like, it's actually not very healthy to make it like that. You know, I remind myself all the time that it's not selfish to prioritise my needs. I don't want to put my needs in front of other people's needs, I don't mean like that, but in terms of like my safety and my needs are important, and no reputation or image is more important than my safety and my experience, and I'm allowed to feel that. And I still struggle with being an individual, having that identity, you know, coming from trauma and stuff. Sometimes I feel guilty for asserting myself at all, which probably sounds weird because you see me on this channel when I talk about politics, but the reason I do this on this channel is because I can't do it in my life. So I feel like that's more of the real me. So this channel has helped me craft the real me. It's helped me analyse this stuff. It's helped me find other people that are in similar situations and understand myself, unlearn my own stuff. Always be aware that even though someone has good intentions, it doesn't mean they don't cause harm. Yeah, sorry to like go off on a tangent, but like, yeah, YouTube's actually helped me be a lot more healthy. It's like really helped me so much. So yeah, I do struggle that. I hear the voices of various people in my head, their words. You know, at your darkest moments you hear those things, but they're not you. They are not us. They're not ours. Like, they were planted, unfortunately. I wish there was some way they could like brain scan you and take them out. I wish it would be like on the computer where you cut and paste things, like take them out, put them in the recycling bin. But unfortunately they're there. But if they have to be there, then at least I want to use them. So at least I can try and use them to understand people who think like that and think, okay, well, why did I think like that? What made me think like that? And what might be making them think like that? In some ways you can maybe use it to try and help people or turn people around, because you can kind of understand why. And that might help maybe to stop it. I don't know. I hope so. But yeah, thank you for your question. I'm sorry this is quite long. I wasn't intending it to be, but like, these vlogs are really helpful to me, as well as, well, I hope they're helpful to you guys. They might not be at all, but they're really helpful to me. So I love you loads. Again, I'll put my PO box details in the description box, so you can write to me. Put a stamped address envelope in it if you want me to write back to you, because I'll need that to send it back. But yeah, thank you to those who've sent letters, and I'll try and get back to you really soon. Alright, I love you loads. Hope you're doing okay, and thank you for your questions. Feel free to leave any more, and I'll just go through them whenever. Okay, love you loads. I'll see you really soon. Bye!